I have some questions for you if you don't mind.
Oh no, I'm on the spot. Okay, go ahead.
So my first question is, I'd actually like to hear more about your story about, when the CIA had imprisoned you and, you know, that whole story. I mean, most of my followers from my Facebook page are familiar with, they've read your book and stuff, but it's just, I don't know. I want to hear more about that story. It seems like there needs to be some more details that we all want to hear about.
Yes, well, when you have 2 weeks, I will be glad to tell you that story. Uh, so
It's a
you
long
haven't read the
story.
book? You haven't read the chapter "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to CNN" and "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Church"? Because I go into pretty good detail in those chapters in the book,
Yeah,
Sibrel.com.
it, right. It's just I have some kind of specific questions. Like at one point, you said that there was kind of a two factions within the government, and one of them chose to bail you out, essentially, and save you from that other faction which had imprisoned you.
Yeah, that's correct. So I have to interpret what that means. Basically, when I was being illegally kidnapped, two people, as best as I could tell, who worked for what was called the MCIA, the Marine Corps Intelligence Activity Department. They literally kidnapped me from the kidnappers, you could say, and gave me a debriefing. We're very concerned for my health because the other party had drugged me illegally. They took my blood pressure. I think they might have been medical personnel as well as intelligence personnel. And so I got the impression there were like good spies, bad spies within the federal government, which there probably are. I mean, most people, I believe, maybe I'm naive, try to do what is right and good. The problem is the president, you only have to control two political parties to control the federal government. It's
Yeah.
pretty simple. They're corrupt on both sides. So it appears to me that even though most people are honest and good, if you can control the president, then that corrupt president appoints the corrupt leaders of the FBI, the CDC, the FDA, and so forth. So it's actually pretty easy to control the government, even though there are mostly honest workers in it, because the people at the top controlling the control valves are the corrupt ones. And that's the case to this day. So when things like the moon landing fraud happened, Kennedy assassination, 9/11, or whatever, where intelligent people, honest people in the government saw what was really going on, apparently they created a separate faction. If domestic people, which appears to be the case, brought down the buildings on 9/11, they had control over military assets. They had control over NORAD and fighter jets and satellites. So maybe the good people in the government who are opposed to them have such control as well. And so when I was being detained for trying to get proof of the moon landing fraud to CNN, a tape we discovered of them faking part of the moon mission right in front of your eyes, apparently this other group came in to make sure I was okay. And all this is, talked about in great detail in my book at Sibrel.com. And it's really the first time I ever publicly talked about it. I already figured, hey, I'm trying to get people to accept a very bizarre truth. They really did fake the moon landing. I don't want to make that any more difficult than going into the CIA, abducted me and gave me true serum to find out where the originals of this tape were. But that did happen. So Moon Man goes into great detail about that, including, as you know, the deathbed confession of an eyewitness who saw them film the first fake moon landing at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968 and said so as he was dying, that he even murdered a coworker to cover it up, which, you don't make this stuff up as you're a day or an hour away from meeting your maker and fearing the judgment to come. So the saddest thing about the moon landing fraud is that it's true. I mean, who would have thought they really did fake the moon landing?
I have a question. I wanted to come back to your story about the abduction. Okay, it's the thing is that it's just my own personal question, but regarding these two factions in the government, and the one of them stepped in to help you and pull you out of there, was it due to the fact that you were Christian?
Well, I got the, you could say, spiritual impression that these were godly people. And, to tell you the truth, belief in God is not religious, it's secular. So, whether there's a divine creator is really a secular issue. Religion has given bad God a bad name, really, for the most part. It does appear that there might have been, that affiliation, you could say. The reason why I originally turned down this project when Bill Casey, who worked at NASA, who saw that it was a fraud, asked me to do a film about it, I turned it down for fear that it could be true. And if I start looking into it, it could be dangerous. But when I realized that I'm going to die anyway, and that a judgment for how we live our lives just seems logical. And here's the most important thing, Rasa, that the faking of the moon landing is so much more profound historically than if they had actually gone. Do you see that? Either they planted a flag, came back, whoa, that was a close one, or they lied to the whole world, the country that claims to be the greatest accomplishment of mankind, like the ship that God himself could not sink, the Titanic, which sunk, you see? That Nixon called the man on the moon the greatest event in the history of the world, second only to God making the universe. You see, the fact that mankind's greatest boast is part of his folly and fall and deceitfulness, and that they really did fake the moon landing. That is so much more profound historically than if they'd actually gone. So I changed my mind. 5 years later, I said, I'm going to die anyway. This is important. We could have a great awakening about everything. But if people still think, because it's a pleasant lie, that the moon missions are real, we will always have a corrupt government. We have to acknowledge it. It has to come out. And it's really the linchpin. You see, it's the finger out of the dike that will bring all the corruption down because it will enrage people. I had two NBC news directors say emphatically the tape I uncovered proves beyond any doubt the moon missions were fake. One said it would bring down the federal government if the truth came out. At first, I didn't believe him, but maybe it would. Maybe it'll crash the stock market. Maybe the dollar will crash. I don't know. However, they did fake the moon landing. That's a fact, whether you realize it or not. And that fact should be known by humanity and acknowledged if we ever expect to make progress as a species.
So let me ask you just another really quick question here. It's about Gene. Okay, the police there was okay they broke into his house, stole his computer, and he filed a police report. And also, he said that he also had proof that the CIA had threatened him, and his son also had proof that the CIA had threatened him. Can you speak more about this part of the story?
Well, what you're talking about is the son of the man who I witnessed them filming Apollo 11, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd at 1968 at Cannon Air Force Base, where he was chief of security. His son verified these details. He lived right across from the base entrance in Clovis, New Mexico, and that he got a list from President Johnson, who was there for the first 3 days of filming, of 15 VIP people. They would be allowed to come in and eyewitness this, including Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the list, who weren't apparently even in the spacesuits. They had somebody else as their double. And when I was verifying this for my book at Sibrel.com, he said his house was broken into and as much documentation as possible about his father's, job in the Air Force was confiscated. And then days later, two government employees showed up and threatened to kill him and his family if he ever spoke to me again about his father's participation in the moon landing fraud. This was about 2 years ago. The FBI investigated it. The White House investigated it. The United States Senate Intelligence Committee investigated it. This is very serious business. They did fake the moon landing, and it's a great embarrassment to the United States government if the truth comes out. They can claim they're going to release it someday. We'll see. That would be in their best interest if they did that.
Yes. So I have a few more questions if you don't mind. Because you have some connections in Hollywood and you know some Hollywood people. So maybe you can help me understand a few things about Hollywood. Um, uh, my first question is regarding Guy Hamilton. And Guy Hamilton wrote the Diamonds Are Forever, or he wrote the movie Diamonds Are Forever. And well, his screen, I guess he got the help from Tom Mankiewicz, helped write the screenplay for Diamonds Are Forever. So why would they have included this fake moon landing scene? Are they trying to awake to the public here, as early as 1971 in that Diamonds Are Forever?
Well, it's like a water cooler joke. People at that level hang out with each other. Celebrities often marry celebrities. Government celebrities are gaga over Hollywood celebrities, and Hollywood celebrities are gaga over government celebrities. They each boast to their wives, "Hey, I just hung out with the president. I just hung out with such and such celebrity." The lighting is what gave away to people in Hollywood that the moon missions were indeed falsified. And I suppose, as a tongue in cheek joke, they had a James Bond movie have him run around in a set of a fake moon landing with the astronauts, faking slow motion. I guess that's just their way of being humorous and intelligent, knowing
Right.
that the moon missions were indeed falsified.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question in that line of questions. Okay, so Capricorn 1, 1977, Peter Hyams, right? Uh, so why I mean, you're not familiar with any of these directors, but any idea why he made Capricorn 1?
Well, yeah, because he was saying the moon missions were fake. On the 21st, or sorry, 25th anniversary edition of the DVD, they claim that was not the case, that he really believes the moon missions were real. But come on, Peter Hyams knew that the moon missions are fake. That's why they made the movie and called it a fake Mars mission instead of a moon mission because they didn't want to be so directly insulting. No one would make and execute such a detailed film about a fake Mars mission if they really thought they went to the moon. They wouldn't dishonor that memory, no matter what they might claim 25 years later to be politically correct.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention one last little movie here. This was the 2014 Interstellar. So this was filmed by Sir Christopher Edward Nolan. Okay, so in that movie, Interstellar, they just come out and say, "Oh, we faked the Apollo missions because of political reasons, blah blah blah." So it was also kind of even as late as 2014, they're already kind of admitting it. So these are very famous Hollywood directors, right? So they're probably all part of a club, and they probably all get together and make jokes about, let's kind of how to say that, punch them on the blind side or something. We're gonna say it to their faces, even though they don't know it yet, right?
Yeah, well, there are two other movies in the last 4 years that were about faking the moon mission, and apparently one is about to come out now. Maybe they're preparing the public for an admission that
Right.
they were indeed falsifying the moon missions for whatever excuse they come up with.
So actually, coming back to this thing about telling it to their faces, even though they're still denying that it's real. Like, for example, there was this one uh, TV show where they were showing planes like going to crash into the Twin Towers, like just before the actual crash happened. It's kind of like punching them on the blind side. Okay, we're going to do this to you, but we're going to kick you in the private parts while you're there and just publicly say it, tell you in your face in these Hollywood movies and things like that. So, what about, I wanted to come back to here, Hollywood directors. So, we have Stanley Kubrick. Now, from what I understood, Stanley Kubrick on his deathbed told his children to do not allow them to change the release date of Eyes Wide Shut. Eyes Wide Shut must be released on July 16th because obviously he wanted it to be released on the launch of the Apollo missions, right?
Well, yeah,
So,
there's hearsay as to whether or not Kubrick would have participated in the faking of the moon landing. The fact is, the moon landings were falsified. So somebody was in charge of the fake pictures. They could either hire the general of the media department at the Pentagon and get good security and amateur results, or hire the best filmmaker on the planet, who, what a coincidence, in 1968 was shooting a film about going to the moon. And so have both films look different so that the Apollo missions look real, you see? And what a feather in his cap for a highly intelligent chess player to have made really the best film of all time, Apollo 11, so good people think it's real. And that's who I would have chosen. And why he would insist contractually that his very last film, Eyes Wide Shut, people looking right at a moon picture that's fake and not seeing that it's fake, why he would insist that that last film air, broadcast, release on the 30th anniversary of the launch to the moon, you can see for yourself. In the film The Shining, the little red rum boy has a hand knit shirt that says Apollo 11. Who knows? That's who I would have chosen, and that's probably who they did choose.
right.
Maybe he
Well, it's
only
not,
filmed the first one, because the later one, the next one,
well,
allegedly had the camera malfunction. Then they allegedly didn't go after that. So it was 2 years between the first faking and the next one we had live TV pictures from. So maybe they had time to get their act together, didn't need him anymore.
well, so it is a documented fact. There's a photograph of Kubrick walking with several NASA employees, and that photograph was taken at Kubrick's studio set in England. And when there was a documented fact that Kubrick had hired two NASA employees to come to to England and work with him. So there was exchange. This is a documented fact, but also that in the photograph where the NASA employees are visiting Kubrick's studio set, the head of NASA dubbed Kubrick's studio set as NASA East, right? So he's referring to as England. He says America is a NASA West and the Kubrick studio is a NASA East, right? So this is the documented fact that there was definitely cooperation between the two.
Well, I think NASA chose Kubrick to fake the first moon landing, Apollo 11. He also, Kubrick, received a special NASA built lens for the filming of Barry Lyndon to shoot under natural candlelight. And it was the first film lens able to do that, manufactured by NASA. So I
Right.
think there was certainly a connection going on there. I think intelligent people in the military got a kick out of his film. Uh, what was it called? Dr. Strangelove. And
Mm.
apparently
Writing.
he somehow got pretty close similarities to the inside of a B-52 aircraft, which during the time was highly confidential. So they appreciated his expertise in being able to pull that off, and that probably gave him good credentials to fake the moon landing as well.
Right. I wanted, if you don't mind, I wanted to come back to this Kubrick's insisting that Eyes Wide Shut be released on July 16th. So now the thing is this: why did NASA choose July 16th for the launch of Apollo 11? The reason is because July 16th it's a free Masonic holiday. It's called the Congress of Wilhelmsbad. And in 1782 is when the Illuminati and the Freemasons joined together and created the Illuminized Freemasonry in 1782. It was a big party they had at the castle of Hesse, the Hessian dynasty. the Illuminati and the Freemasons joined together in 1782 on July 16th. Okay, and that the same night, July 16th, 1782, was when Mozart was releasing his play called The Abduction of the Seraglio. So Mozart, who was also a Freemason, released a play in the city of Venice called The Abduction of the Seraglio. So if you look at the meaning of that name, what actually is happening is the Illuminati were abducting the Freemasons. So July 16th is a very important holiday for them. And the same thing, if you look at September 11th, why is it 9/11? Why did they choose 9/11? Because September 11 is also a Freemasonic holiday called the Battle of Stirling Bridge. Okay, so the Battle of Stirling Bridge is when William Wallace, the famous Freemason, um, in 1297, the William Wallace and the Freemasons of Scotland drove off the British forces that were trying to stop Scotland from gaining their independence. So that's why this September 11th is actually the birth of Freemasonry, because that's when they gained their independence, according to the Freemasons. This William Wallace was the one who helped them gain independence, where the Scottish rite of Freemasonry could then thrive. So September 11th is also a Freemasonic holiday. And a lot of people don't know. A lot of people saw the video of George Bush Sr. talking about the beginning of the New World Order, right? Everybody saw that video. Today we're announcing the beginning of the New World Order. This speech was also given on September 11th, 11 years before 9/11, okay? So George Bush was warning you, okay, this is our Freemasonic holiday, and we're going to be launching our Freemasonic agendas on these days. The same thing. I could go on and on about this. It's not just 9/11 and Apollo 11. It goes on and on. There's all these Freemasonic holidays which they've been using for these special dates.
Well, actually, I heard that George Bush Sr. was not a Freemason. You actually had to make a donation.
Wasn't maybe if he was, whether or not he was a Freemason, wasn't he part of that what is that club,
Skull and Bones.
the Skull and Bones, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes. All right. So I have one other question for you, if you don't mind. Um, my question is this: after Astronauts Gone Wild, okay, after Astronauts Gone Wild, after you made that, did you somehow still keep in touch with any of the astronauts after that?
I did have private conversations with several astronauts off the record, and a couple of them made it clear to me that I'm correct and good luck, because no one will accept what you have to say. Uh, Eisenhower made a farewell address on January 19th, 1961. He was president for 8 years. And his last day in office, he said, beware of the corrupt people in the government taking over the country. Why didn't he say that and do something about it for 8 years? I guess he didn't want to be assassinated and wanted to live into retirement and enjoy his grandchildren. But is that decision morally right? No, it was not. He selfishly held on to his life at the forfeiting of 300 million fellow Americans. You see, his successor tried to do something about it, and it cost him his life. So be it. We're going to die anyway. Eisenhower should have done something about it while he was in office, because he still died and faced judgment. And he faced judgment for being a coward, right? For being a coward. In Revelation, when it warns people, unless you repent, you won't enter heaven, it says the liars, the drunkards, the immoral will not enter the kingdom of God. You know what the first one is, Rasa? The cowardly. Unfortunately, he made a fearful decision. He wanted to protect his own life at the cost of 300 million other lives. There are honest people in the government hearing my voice who need to come forward and acknowledge the facts of this corruption. And even if people are personally responsible for killing Kennedy, faking the moon landing, who knows what else, I think they should be granted absolute amnesty so that we can get the truth and the facts out for humanity. That's more important than persecuting one person who's probably old and about to meet their maker anyway. We need to have a general amnesty for any government employee who comes forward and confesses their error, including homicide, whatever. We need to know the facts. The facts are so important. The fact is, more genocide has happened in the last 100 years than in the thousands of years of history before then. Maybe just the technology has changed and the technique on how to get rid of people they don't like. That's their plan. I don't think they're twiddling their thumbs. Unless these people are stopped, we will be annihilated. They're already faking the moon landing, killing presidents in broad daylight. We have 3,000 architects and engineers risking their reputations, saying it's impossible for a pinhole airplane to go in and out of a steel grid and cause its collapse. Just look at a picture of the Oklahoma City bombing. Half the building was blown away. The structure still stood. 3,000 architects and engineers say it's impossible for a pinhole airplane to
Right.
cause that to come down. It was explosives done out in the open. Nothing's done about it. You see that?
Yeah.
So
I want
what can we do?
I
The
wanted
truth
go
will
ahead.
set us free.
Right. What I'm saying, I was in New York City on 9/11, and I climbed up to my rooftop and I could see the smoke coming from Manhattan. And then I started turning on the news channels, and I saw one image of just before the tower came down, the top of it started to tilt and lean. The plane had hit and essentially cut the building in half, and the top half of the building started to fall over, and then they did the controlled demolition, and it all fell down to hide the fact that the top half of the building was just about to fall off, you know. So yeah, it's anybody who's a physicist or an engineer would know that that was a hoax, and so that's what actually, it was from that time that I actually started watching your video about the moon landing. So I want to thank you personally, because you've been here so long, coming back to this thing you said about not being cowardly. The Bible said to don't be coward. You've been, fighting for this thing ever since, 2001, really, since that movie began. But you've taken more, bashes and abuses from anybody. So I personally wanted to thank you for being here with us for so long and fighting the good fight.
Well, the thing is, Robert Kennedy Jr., he has more access to the JFK files than Oliver Stone does. If he says his uncle, President Kennedy, was killed by the CIA, then I trust his expert opinion. Then you have Robert McNamara. He was defense secretary during the Vietnam War. On his deathbed, guilt-ridden, he said the whole start of the war, which the public was against, that he and the CIA got together and created a Pearl Harbor event to get public support. The Gulf of Tonkin attack, he said, was completely fabricated, never happened. Congress wrote a law called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. Congress passed a law based on something that never happened. You see, that led to the death of 3 million people, including 58,220 Americans, right? So if the government is willing to kill their own duly elected president, if they're willing to kill 58,220 of their own soldiers needlessly, I don't think they're going to have a problem faking an image of the moon on television. It's just that it's a pleasant lie. People have to be willing to be wrong. I thought the moon landings were the most glorious thing in the world, and I had to reluctantly admit they really did fake them. That's how bad our government has gotten. We have to face facts. Otherwise, we'll never be healed and we'll be destroyed by these people who run the world.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to one thing. Now, NASA, three times in their history, have made public attempts to debunk moon landing conspiracy theories. NASA themselves have made public debunkings. Most of the debunkings just comes from NASA fanboys, but NASA themselves have made three official ones. One was after Bill Casing's book, right? After Bill Casing's book came out, NASA themselves released a document to debunk Bill Casing. The second time NASA made it public and debunking was just after your video, after, in 2001. What happened on the moon, and what a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. After these two movies came out, then NASA made another official statement to debunk you guys. And then just recently, I think it's their final one, was the 50th anniversary debunking, where NASA themselves released a final third attempt to debunk moon landing hoax conspiracy theorists. Now, since that time, since the 50th anniversary, it seems like they're kind of shifting tracks here and starting getting ready to admit that they faked this thing. You know, there's several examples I have of this. There's a lot of, just recently, one of the biggest YouTube channels called Smarter Every Day made a show exposing the fact that NASA is going to need 15 fuel tankers to fuel up the ship just to make it to the moon. Okay, so this is their way of confessing it. It's like, okay, you know, on Apollo we could do it with one ship, one tank, but now they're saying on Artemis we need to send up tankers to low Earth orbit, 15 tankers to refuel the ship just to make one trip, one landing on the moon. So NASA's already basically admitting that there's no way they could have done the Apollo missions with one tank of fuel. So
Well,
anyway,
that's why they
it's
destroyed all
interesting.
the schematics of the design of the rockets to lunar module. They not only destroyed all the designs, all the hardware, all the telemetry of where the rocket really was, they destroyed all the original videotapes. I mean, if you really went to the moon and spent $200 billion, you would never destroy that investment. However, if you perpetrated a fraud, that's exactly what you would do. We have a recording of Von Braun. You can see this at Sibrel.com, one of the interactive book links of Moon Man. He says you have to build a space station first, and then from there, ferry up a bunch of fuel in order to go to the moon. They never did that, did they? Now they're saying to return to the moon, they have to do what von Braun originally said they had to do. We have a publication from
Refuel.
von Braun that says to go to the moon, you would need 3 rockets at least weighing 800,000 tons. The Saturn V, one rocket, only weighed 2,500 tons. That's a difference of about 30,000%. So a little bit of a difference there in weight, mainly because of the fuel necessary to reach the moon and return. He also said once you landed on the moon, you would need to shield yourself from a barrage of micrometeorites, tens of thousands of which hit the surface of the moon every day, traveling at about 30,000 miles an hour. So you have a grain of sand traveling at 30,000 miles an hour. It's going to go through your spacesuit, the spacecraft, and your skull, causing catastrophic decompression. He said there was a 50% chance every 24 hours of being killed by this. So stay there 2 days, you will be killed. And so he said you needed to build a lead shelter or go into an existing cave on the moon. Never happened, did they? Somehow they can drive cars on the moon in the 60s technology, but today they can only send mannequins to orbit the moon. How about that?
Yeah, these mannequins actually had sensors on inside of them, right? Radiation sensors, and they released the radiation readings from these sensors. You know, it's showing a big peak as they're passing through the Van Allen belts, and then a constant barrage of radiation once you're on the other side of the Van Allen belts. And the only time the radiation levels drop is once you enter into a low lunar orbit. Once you're closer to the surface, the moon itself acts as a shield from part of the radiation which is coming from the direction which you're in the shadow. So if you're on the moon, that's why NASA themselves are talking about building a moon base. We have to put like 10 feet of cement houses, right? They plan on using the lunar soil to build these like igloos, with 10-foot thick walls or 15-foot thick walls just to protect from the radiation. So
Well,
it's
yeah,
kind of
also
they're
to
kind of
protect the vaults of the casinos.
yeah, they want to, I mean that I don't know why I don't think that, this whole plan of sending humans to the moon or sending humans to the Mars, it's just it's kind of a ridiculous plan, right? Because
But they just
who's
keep
gonna,
postponing it over and over and over again. 10 presidents have said they're going to return to the moon in 5 years, right? Starting with George Bush Sr., then you had Clinton say it twice, then you had Bush Jr. say it, then you had Obama say it, then you had Trump say it twice. And no one seems to be able to go to the moon, yet somehow you can go in 8 years with 1960s technology, but it's going to take 15 or 20 years with 50-year newer technology for some reason. How about that? They got
right?
caught in this lie, and now they're like a little kid that keeps, saying they didn't take the cookie with cookie crumbs all over themselves, and they still keep saying they didn't take the cookie. I don't know how much longer that can go on. We'll see.
No, it can't go on very long. Oh, I wanted to point out, can I show you my t-shirt one last time?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is it says NASA. This is a NASA in China. In China, we have this NASA logo brand of t-shirts.
Yeah,
Okay,
show it one
so
more
this
time.
is a NASA.
Show it a little bit
Yeah,
longer.
okay. It says just do it later. So this is the, and there's the Nike swoosh. So this is an agreement between NASA and Nike, and they changed the Nike logo, just do it, to the new NASA logo, just do it later. You know, because this is always been NASA's motto. You know, if you can't do it for real, just fake it. If you can't make it, just fake it. Just do it
Yeah,
later.
what can you do? Well, it is what it is. They did fake the moon landing, and we'll see if people in the world are mature enough to tell the truth about it.
What do you think about the? So there's been two times that I'm aware of where, probably more, but two times I'm aware of where the government admitted they lied, and the first one was in the Gulf of Tonkin. They had to make a public admission that there was no ships in the area that day. And the second time they admitted they lied was this so-called weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, you know, the excuse they used to go invade Iraq. So they admitted that they knew that there was no weapons. Am
Well, what
I?
do you think's going to happen? China
Oh,
knows, Russia knows the moon missions are fake. What's going to happen? What's going to become of this? Is the truth ever going to come out? What's your opinion?
God, I really don't like talking about the future, you know, because in what my personal way of looking at the future is what I call a balance between the optimistic and the pessimistic. I tried to balance these two, okay? So, uh, pessimistically speaking, it's not looking good, you know, because you've got these just a few days ago, Iran supposedly launched an attack against Israel, and then now you've got this um, Ukrainian Russian thing going on, and so the agenda now of these bankers is to create a World War III, and they're already using the terms the new axis of evil, which is Iran, Russia, and China. So this is their plan. They're already not hiding it anymore. So pessimistically speaking, it's not looking too good. But then on the other hand, I try to be optimistic about these things. An optimistic way of looking at these things is like these bankers, these puppet masters who are, you know, the industrial military complex are playing a game of poker, and they've been saving their best card for the last, and they're betting all they have on this last card, you know. So in my optimistic opinion, this October 7 attack, which led to the Israel-Hamas war of 2023, this was their final card, their joker, you know, the ace in the deck. And I'm hoping that this card fails and they won't be able to get their World War III. That's my optimistic point of view.
Well, Russ, about the future, it doesn't really scare me because wait a minute. Wait a minute. Here it comes. Here comes the future. Wait a minute. Here. Oh, there it is. Oh, gone now. Oh well. Hope we have more.
Hope we have more. Yes, that's beautiful, man.